First up, as northern beef producers gradually resume their export trade, another successful meat export industry is still trying to win back its single most important market. It's 2 years since Russia banned kangaroo meat imports, citing health and hygiene concerns. The collapse of the trade has had a dramatic impact on everyone from shooters to processors. But there's now some optimism that the trade might soon restart and that other markets might open new opportunities. Here's Chris Clark.
I like being in the bush, and I guess it's a bit of a freedom to be your own boss.
As most people are heading home for the day, Brad Cooper's just heading off to work. A butcher by trade, a roo shooter by night. Brad Cooper's shooting full-time again, even though many others have done exactly the opposite since the Russian market collapsed.
It's extremely difficult to make a living out of it, and a lot of blokes, especially over the last few years, have gone on to seek part-time employment, or even full-time employment, and cut back their shooting activities.
An industry which lives by killing a national symbol is, unsurprisingly, keen to emphasise the effort it puts into making sure suffering's minimised. So before Brad Cooper goes shooting, he checks his weapon.
Required with the humane destruction of kangaroos that you do check your rifle before you commence shooting.
There are quotas on how many roo can be taken and an industry code of practice about which animals are to be targeted, not females with young. There are rules too about how they're to be shot.
All animals have to be shot in the head for a brain shot.
Of course, the head shot won't be perfect every time. But as Brad Cooper points out, at 65 cents a kilogram, half the price of a few years ago, there's a strong incentive to make every shot count.
Over a 12-month period, you might miss a couple in 100, sometimes less, sometimes more. You're concerned about the welfare of the animal, and also if you're missing, it's not profitable for your business.
Kangaroo shooting's the harvesting of wild animals, with all the variables that implies. The animals follow their natural rhythms, not the hunters.
Normally there's a few roos along here, but they've made a lyre out of me.
Shooters need to be able to know at night, at 100 metres or more, the species and sex of an animal, before coming to a decision about whether it's big enough to be worth taking. So there can be a fair bit of stopping and starting.
That's not the one I was after.
In this part of Queensland, Brad Cooper's looking for 3 different species.
On this particular property, eastern grey kangaroos, red kangaroos and wallaroos. Predominantly this property here we're on tonight, is generally probably 80% grey kangaroos I harvest here. It does vary a little bit from time to time. Not a lot of wallaroos, and the reds come and go throughout the year. So, doe or two on season, and the cycling, and the bucks chasing the doe, and the one kept hopping, and the other one, yeah, they're all hop, hop, hop. Well, we got it.
After a kill, the carcasses are dressed in the field, and that presents its own set of issues. Provenance and hygiene being the most important. The roo's bled, the tail and a leg are docked, the head removed, body cavity emptied. And when Brad Cooper, the trained butcher, takes over, this happens in all but the blink of an eye.
I record the property I'm on, harvesting on, species, and the time it was harvested. So and that's all required for traceback. Different companies have different requirements as to how they're to be dressed, but essentially everyone is aiming to present a clean and wholesome product. So that's hence why washing in between any sort of cut that's made on the animal, washing the hands, knife, steel, and using sanitiser to ensure, you know, the best possible outcome for a hygienic and wholesome product.
It's 3:30 by the time Brad Cooper brings his night's work back to the chiller. With more than 30 roos and a wild pig on board, it's been a reasonable night after a slow start. Give me an idea what a night like this is worth to you in dollar value?
Probably tonight, somewhere around probably around $520, $530. However, you've got a cost associated with that of probably around $350. So you're only making a very basic wage. To make a meaningful living out of it, you need to be filling your car every night you go out, and that can be quite a challenge. And especially the reason being, it's a wild harvest, so it takes. It's not always all that consistent.
It's a long way short of what a good night's work paid before Russia banned kangaroo imports. So from grossing somewhere around $500 or $600 a night, what would you have been doing prior to the end of the Russian trade?
Oh, yeah, probably about 800 to 1,000. But yeah, sort of, that sounds like a lot of money to a lot of people, but it really isn't. Once you take your costs out, there's really not a lot left at the end of the day, and you've got your hand in your pocket all the time, putting it back in your business, and I guess that's part of the business, and you certainly don't harvest kangaroos with the notion you're going to make $1 million out of it. That's just foolhardy.
Typically, roo shooters are one-man bands, sole contractors who supply to processors. But Brad Cooper's a member of the Maranoa Kangaroo Growers and Harvesters Cooperative. A cooperative that brings together land users who've historically seen the kangaroo from very different perspectives. The co-op's a partnership between shooters and landholders. Landholders like Bim Struss, whose primary goal is to grow cattle, not kangaroo.
We've got a 1,000-cow breeder herd. Havelock's been run as a breeder herd now for the last 20-odd years, where we take off our weaners, so our steer turn-off is always marketed as weaner steers. We don't go on and fatten them.
It's been worthwhile.
Tom Garrett's a co-op member too, but with a background as a shooter, not a grazier.
They're very quiet. If we're going to market a product, we need to involve all the people in the chain. And landholders, of course, are an important link to the chain for the co-op because they're actually growing the animals on their country. So what we need to try and change is the fact that landholders need to perhaps look at the kangaroo as a resource rather than a pest.
I always considered them, Chris, a pest. Initially, they were a pest to us, and we would have really liked to get rid of all our kangaroos if it was possible. But the fact that we're never going to be able to do that, it was probably time that we looked at an opportunity to be involved in something that was going to give us some sort of return out of them. If we're going to fatten the damn things, if we're going to breed them and fatten them, well then maybe there's some return in it for us as well.
No one's suggesting that kangaroo's about to supplant beef as the core enterprise at Havelock. But Bim Struss sees other benefits in being part of the co-op.
We've developed a relationship with a shooter. As he goes round the property at night times, he'll often know that our greenhouse bore is meant to be at a certain level. If he notices a problem there or is a leaky trough, we'll get a phone call next day to say, Bim, I noticed a problem here. And that's a relationship that's great, that suits us.
High-end value in action.
But the co-op was barely up and running before the Russian export ban hit. Add some wet seasons and a high dollar, it's been tough going.
A huge impact, Chris. The bins we're passing now are a direct result of the Russian closure. That was a company that was started a number of years ago now with a brand new purpose-built facility, especially to meet the Russian market, with some Russian investment. And of course they're closed now and haven't operated for some time.
And you're not shooting anymore?
I'm not shooting. That's a personal choice. It's simply a choice I made.
The official Russian reason for the ban focused on hygiene. So the co-op's been trying to lift standards in the field and at the chiller.
We've installed a web-based product now that monitors our cold room and the temperatures of our product in the cold room 24/7, is available through password encryption on the web. Also has the ability to send alarms, so we can set up alarm temperatures so that we know if there's a fan failure or a power failure, there's a text message sent via the web to the people that are in charge of our boxes, and that's identified and they can take action immediately.
The commercial kangaroo meat industry operates through a network of thousands of shooters like Brad Cooper, who stock chillers dotted around the country. The contents of the chillers end up going to just a handful of processors. Macro Meats is the biggest in the business. They prepare kangaroo for domestic and export markets. These are marinated cuts for local supermarkets.
The supermarkets take a fairly high quality product. They'll take all the leg cuts, which is the loin fillets, the fillets, top sides, rumps, and the top end restaurants mainly just take all the fillets, whether it's overseas or within Australia. It doesn't matter, they all require high standard product.
Those prime cuts are only 30% of the animal. Russia was an important market because it wanted what was left over.
The Russian trade was all about meat that went for small goods, essentially. Yes. What does that mean in terms of your processing facility here? How big an impact's it had?
Well, 70% of the animal is manufacturing meat, so it's significant. You can't operate without having an outlet for your manufacturing meat.
There are other markets for manufacturing meat. Have they come in and has that taken up the slack, or have you seen a general drop-off in demand because of the Russian trade?
No, the demand's there, it's high. The industry can't keep up the demand for manufacturing meat. The difference between Russia is they see the value in it and they'll pay a much higher price for it.
Ray Border doesn't think there was anything wrong with hygiene or quality before the Russian ban, but he's revamped his own business to try to make sure the question is beyond any doubt. He built his own lab and has 5 scientists on staff. He's trebled the number of people looking at quality assurance. And he says his Russian customers and regulators know about these changes.
They know about it and they've been out here and seen it firsthand themselves, so they're fully accepted of our standard and very, very pleased with the way we've progressed.
So why isn't the Russian trade reopened?
I think it's right on the doorstep now, but it's just normal politics and normal lag time that regulations have to be rewritten. We're very, very close now, though.
As president of the Processors Industry Group, he's also optimistic that new markets are opening up and that in future the industry might not be so dependent on one big player as it was with Russia.
China's very close as well, and the Ukraine are close. The Philippines are reconsidering their position on kangaroo. But even besides that, Europe is starting to find the benefits of kangaroo, and we're actually getting record prices in Europe if it wasn't for the Australian dollar. So really, the whole industry has been recognised as a high-quality product, but we're really after the Russian and the Chinese market to make the difference.
If that optimistic outlook becomes a reality, it should make a difference to the money Brad Cooper earns for a night's work. And it might give the co-op a chance to realise its modest goals.
I think there's some real opportunities for us to make a difference on a local level. And, you know, it's not trying to change the whole industry across the nationwide. It's doing something on a local level.
That'd be a welcome change after a couple of tough years.